Hello, professor in class. First I want to say that I think this week's video was really good. Please excuse me if there's any background noise. I live next to a playground. I don't mean to be unprofessional, but there are some children outside. But that said, I feel like this week's video was really good, talking about power, be it positional or personal. I think that your statement about when you first came into management, and how you thought that power was an illusion, I think that in some ways it can be, maybe a little bit different from the way that you thought it was. But to give an example of that, I had a manager, again, when I first came into healthcare. I got in the door through materials management, so supply, logistics, that type of stuff. And I had a manager who was, I would say, personally not so great, pretty impersonal. We would see him, but it was just kind of, high and by, and he let his supervisors basically do all the delegating, interacting, getting to know us, motivating us, building relationships with the team, versus him, which I thought was a little strange, considering he was right on site and, manager suites right in the same area. We could walk right in, I thought that was interesting to start. But going back to power being an illusion, he definitely had positional power, as he was able to, hire, fire people, if he had to do corrective actions, those types of things. So he could definitely use those to, quote unquote, persuade people. But as you said, that can go one of two ways, which is either having people, get on board with what you're asking, or, getting a lot of pushback and rebellion. Well, I like to say that power is an illusion sometimes, because it turns out that his supervisors, who he, again, pretty much left the relationship building and everything else to, I feel like had the real power. He thought that he had a lot of power, because he could, again, hire and fire people, but he didn't have nearly as much power and influence as well, as his supervisors did. And my supervisor, we had more than one being in a warehouse. My specific supervisor was one who really, really, as you said, would roll up his sleeves, get in the trenches with us. I mean, he did not ask us to do not one thing that he wasn't willing to do, and that he didn't demonstrate. So that said, a lot of people wanted to work with him. I was very fortunate to work with him, established a long-term, relationship with him I speak to him out of work, but professional relationship. But I would say to this day, he's the best supervisor I've ever had. I would work overtime, a lot of overtime with him that I didn't have to do, and at the time wasn't making the greatest pay, but I was willing to do it because I liked working with him. He was great. Like I said, we worked very well together. He was great at being, a motivator. We talked about things, personal, work related. So the working relationship went beyond just, again, a hi and goodbye. Hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Like, I feel like we really got to know each other. And again, the biggest thing for me was that he would help out and not ask you to do a thing that he wasn't willing to do, to show you, to get in there and do with you. So I argue that my manager had the illusion of, I guess I should say, how much power he had. And then I also argue that personal power is probably, so I would say, is a lot stronger than what your positional power is going to be. I think that it has more influence. You can get a lot more accomplished, and you can get people to do things without having to wield that positional power and, quote unquote, pull rank on people and try to force them to do one thing or the other. I think positional power is, it's great when you have it, but I think that when we talk about, some of the greatest leaders, and we see people in high places, yes, it comes down to things like networking, who you know, and so on and so forth. But I really think that personal power, those interpersonal relationships, getting to know people, influencing people how they want to be influenced, working with people, acknowledging them how they want to be acknowledged. I really think it's that personal power that really gets you far. And again, I feel like if you do it correctly, you're always going to have outliers. You're always going to have a person here or there. You're going to have situational things that arise. But I think for the most part, if you do it correctly, that personal power will get you a lot farther, and you won't really have to rely on your positional power or wield that as much. So thank you for this week's lecture.